Luna thought she was investing in a lifetime of love when she handed over her inheritance, but her husband and mother-in-law were actually measuring her for a coffin. They waited until she was 6 months pregnant to throw her into the street for a younger woman, never realizing that Luna's father didn't just raise a lady, he raised a strategist. By the time they realized they had been scammed by their own new girl, the handcuffs were already clicking shut. My name is Luna, and for a long time I lived in a world made of glass. It was beautiful, clear, and seemingly perfect. But the thing about glass is that once it starts to crack, there is no stopping the shatter. I grew up with everything. My parents built a multi-million-dollar real estate empire from nothing, and they made sure I never wanted for a thing. But they also tried to warn me. My father used to say, "Luna, a man who loves your shine is easy to find, but a man who loves you in the dark is rare." I thought I found that rarity in Liam. He was charming, soft-spoken, and seemed completely unimpressed by my family's wealth. When he proposed after only 8 months, I felt like I was in a movie. My parents weren't so sure. They saw the way his eyes lingered on the paintings in our foyer a little too long, or how he'd ask casual questions about my trust fund over dinner. But I was 25 and in love. I told them they were being cynical. I told them Liam was different. The first crack appeared 6 months after our wedding. We were sitting in the kitchen of the condo my parents had bought us as a wedding gift. Liam looked devastated, staring at his laptop. He told me his logistics startup had hit a cash flow wall. He needed $50,000 immediately, or he'd have to lay off his entire staff. I didn't even blink. I had the money in my personal savings, and what was mine was his, right? When I transferred the funds, his mother, Beatrice, came over that evening. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You're an angel, Luna," she whispered in my ear. "You're the daughter I always prayed for. You've saved our family." I felt a glow of pride. I felt like I was the hero of the story. I didn't realize that I was just the prey, and they had just taken their first bite. The hunger of a parasite is never truly satisfied. It just hibernates until the next meal. A year into our marriage, the requests shifted from emergencies to obligations. Beatrice, my mother-in-law, came to me in tears one Tuesday morning, clutching a stack of past due notices. She claimed her home, the house Liam grew up in, was being foreclosed on due to unforeseen medical debt from a surgery she'd never fully explained. She sat on my designer sofa, wringing her hands, wailing about how she'd be on the streets. I looked at Liam, who stood behind her with a look of practiced helplessness. "I can't let my mother lose her home, Luna," he said, his voice cracking. "But my capital is all tied up in the new contracts." It was a lie, but back then I called it unlucky timing. I wrote a check for $100,000 to clear her mortgage. I thought I was buying her peace of mind. In reality, I was just paying for the stage where they would eventually perform my downfall. Then came the news that changed everything. I was pregnant. When I showed Liam the positive test, he cried. He held me and told me that our son, we somehow knew it was a boy from the start, would have a legacy. But that legacy required one final push. 2 weeks later, Liam sat me down with a series of professional-looking folders. He claimed he had a chance to secure a massive government logistics contract, but he needed to show $200,000 in liquid assets for the bond. "This is it, Luna," he promised, kissing my forehead. "Once this goes through, we'll never have to ask your parents for a dime again. Our son will be born into his own empire." I went to my parents. I'll never forget the look on my father's face in his study. He didn't look angry. He looked defeated. He signed the check for the full $200,000, but as he handed it to me, his hand lingered on the paper. "Luna," he said softly, "I am giving you this because I love you. But please, look at the man you're giving it to. Really look at him." I took that check and ran back to Liam, thinking I was securing our future. I didn't see that Liam and Beatrice were already celebrating. Not a contract, but the fact that they'd successfully milked my family for $350,000 in less than 2 years. I was the CFO of a family that saw me as nothing more than a walking, breathing ATM. The morning of the betrayal started like any other, except for the heavy, suffocating humidity in the air that usually precedes a storm. I was 24 weeks pregnant, 6 months, and the weight of the baby was starting to make every movement an effort. I had a prenatal checkup scheduled for 2 p.m., but the clinic called to say the doctor had an emergency delivery. I decided to head home early, thinking I'd surprise Liam with some takeout, and maybe we could finally start picking out colors for the nursery. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a sleek cherry-red convertible parked in my spot. My heart did a strange little flutter, not of excitement, but of intuition. I walked inside, the house eerily quiet except for the sound of laughter coming from the upstairs master suite. My suite. I pushed the door open, and the world slowed down. There was a woman, thin, blonde, and wearing my favorite silk monogrammed robe, lounging on my bed. She was sipping a glass of the vintage Cristal my father had given us for our anniversary. Liam was sitting on the edge of the bed, rubbing her feet. Liam? My voice was small, barely a whisper. He didn't jump. He didn't look guilty. He just looked bored. He stood up slowly, adjusting his shirt, a shirt I had bought him for $400. "You're home early, Luna. That's inconvenient." "Who is this?" I gasped, clutching my stomach as a sharp pain flared. "This is Tiffany." Beatrice's voice came from the doorway behind me. I turned to see my mother-in-law standing there, her arms crossed, looking at me with pure venom. She's the woman Liam actually deserves. Someone who isn't a constant reminder of how charitable her daddy is. "I gave you everything," I screamed, the tears finally bursting. "I gave you $350,000. I'm carrying your son." Liam stepped toward me, his face a mask of cold indifference. "You gave us a start, Luna, and for that, we're grateful. But the well is dry. Tiffany's family has connections you couldn't dream of, and frankly, I'm tired of playing the grateful husband." "I'm not giving you another cent," I sobbed. "We know," Beatrice sneered. "That's why you're leaving." Before I could process it, Liam grabbed a suitcase from the closet. It was already packed with my clothes. He gripped my arm, not hard enough to bruise, but with a terrifying clinical firmness, and led me toward the stairs. I stumbled, my balance off because of the pregnancy, as they marched me to the front door. The storm had broken. It was pouring. Liam shoved the suitcase into my arms and pushed me out onto the porch. "Don't bother calling the police about the house," he shouted over the thunder. "Beatrice owns it, remember. You paid off the mortgage, but you never put your name on the deed. It's her property. You're trespassing." The door slammed shut. I stood there, drenched, shivering and humiliated, watching through the window as Tiffany waved a manicured hand at me while sipping my wine. I was 24 weeks pregnant, and I had nothing but a suitcase and a car. I drove to my parents' home through a blur of rain and tears, my hands shaking so violently I could barely keep the car on the road. When my father saw me standing on his doorstep, soaked to the bone and clutching my stomach, I thought his heart would stop. But as I told them everything, the money, Tiffany, the lockout, my father's fear turned into something I had never seen before, a quiet, terrifying stillness. "Luna," he said, wrapping a warm blanket around me, "you've been playing a game of hearts. They've been playing a game of chess. It's time we changed the board." The next morning, I met Mr. Henderson, my father's lead corporate attorney. We sat in a glass-walled office that felt like a fortress. I wanted a divorce, but Mr. Henderson wanted more. "Luna," he said, leaning over a stack of bank records, "when you gave Liam that $200,000 for the government contract, did you sign anything?" I told him I had signed a series of partnership agreements. Liam said were just formalities. Mr. Henderson's eyes sharpened. Within 48 hours, his team of forensic accountants found the first thread. Liam hadn't just taken my money. He had used my Social Security number to open 3 separate business lines of credit to fund a lifestyle for Tiffany in a neighboring city. That was identity theft and wire fraud. But then we found the mistress twist. Mr. Henderson's private investigator discovered that Tiffany wasn't a socialite with connections. Her real name was Tabitha, and she was a professional scammer who specialized in finding men who had recently come into large amounts of money. She was already working her magic on Liam. "He's going to hide his assets from the divorce," Mr. Henderson explained. "He's going to try to transfer the house and the remaining cash to her name, so the court can't touch it. It's called a fraudulent transfer." "Should we stop him?" I asked. Mr. Henderson smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "No, we're going to let him do it. In fact, we're going to make it easy for him. If he moves those assets while we have a pending constructive trust claim on the house, which I filed this morning, he isn't just a cheating husband anymore. He's a federal felon committing bankruptcy fraud." I spent the next 3 months playing the broken victim. I sent Liam pathetic texts, begging him to come to the doctor's appointments, which he ignored or mocked. I let him believe I was too depressed to fight. While he and Beatrice were busy washing my inheritance money into Tiffany's accounts and signing the house deed over to her to protect it from me, I was documenting every single signature. I wasn't crying anymore. I was counting down the days until the trap snapped shut. The morning of the final sting was a crisp, clear Saturday. I sat in the back of Mr. Henderson's black SUV, parked just down the street from the house I had once called home. My stomach was heavy now. I was 8 months along, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Through the window, I watched the drama unfold. Tiffany, or Tabitha, had played her hand perfectly. Now that Liam had successfully transferred the deed of the house to her name and moved the last of the contract money into a joint account she controlled, she had no use for him. I saw the front door swing open. Tiffany wasn't sipping wine this time. She was screaming. She began hurling Liam's designer suitcases and Beatrice's porcelain collection onto the lawn. "Get out of my house!" her voice carried down the street. "The deed is in my name, you losers. Call the cops. I'll have you arrested for trespassing." Liam looked like a ghost, standing on the sidewalk in his bathrobe, while Beatrice sat on the curb, wailing as her precious belongings shattered in the driveway. It was a mirror image of the night they threw me out, and the irony was delicious. That's when Mr. Henderson gave the signal. 3 police cruisers pulled up, sirens silent but lights flashing. Liam ran toward them, thinking they were there to help him get back into his house. He started pointing at Tiffany, screaming about fraud. The officers didn't look at Tiffany. They walked straight to Liam. "Liam Miller, you're under arrest for multiple counts of identity theft, wire fraud, and bankruptcy fraud." They spun him around, clicking the handcuffs into place. Another officer approached Beatrice. "Beatrice Miller, you're being taken in as a co-conspirator in a $100,000 mortgage fraud scheme." I stepped out of the SUV. The look on Liam's face when he saw me, not crying but standing tall in a custom maternity dress, was worth every penny I had lost. "Luna, tell them! She stole the house!" he pleaded. I walked up to the edge of the property. "She didn't steal it, Liam. I let her take it so the paper trail would be long enough to send you to prison for a decade. Enjoy the cell." 6 months later, the sun is shining on my parents' terrace. The house and the money were recovered through the courts, and while Tiffany vanished before the feds could grab her, she left Liam and Beatrice with nothing but a criminal record. My son, Leo, is sleeping in my lap, his tiny fingers curled around my thumb. My parents are laughing in the background, setting up for his homecoming party. I lost a husband, but I found my soul. My son will grow up in a mansion built on love and truth, far away from the predators who thought I was weak. I didn't just survive, I won. I sat back in the Adirondack chair, the wood smooth against my palms, and watched the shadows of the white roses dance across the patio. My father was over by the grill, arguing playfully with my mother about the proper way to sear a steak, his laughter booming, a sound I hadn't heard in years. In the middle of the lawn, a small bassinet sat shaded by a silk canopy. My son, Leo, gave a tiny, soft sigh in his sleep. I reached down and touched his cheek, his skin like velvet. For so long, I thought my life was defined by the $350,000 I had lost, by the humiliation of that rainy night, and by the names Liam and Beatrice called me. I thought the hole they left in my heart was permanent. But as I watched the breeze catch the hem of my dress, I realized that the money was just paper. The real inheritance wasn't the bank account. It was the steel in my spine that my father had passed down to me. Liam and Beatrice are currently sitting in a federal holding cell, waiting for a transfer to a long-term facility. Liam got 8 years, Beatrice got 3. They have no money, no house, and most importantly, no one who loves them. Tiffany, or whatever her name really was, took the last of their dignity when she emptied their secret accounts and vanished into the wind. I don't hate them anymore. Hate is a fire that burns the person holding the torch. Instead, I feel a profound, quiet peace. Every time Leo opens his eyes that look just like mine, not Liam's, I'm reminded that I didn't just get revenge. I got a clean slate. The legal battles are over. The house they tried to steal has been sold, and the proceeds were placed into a trust for the little boy sleeping in front of me. As my parents called me over for dinner, I took one last look at the sunset. I was the girl they thought they could break, but I ended up being the storm that cleared their path right out of my life. I am Luna, I am a mother, and for the first time in my life, I am truly, safely home. Luna's journey from a heartbroken victim to a calculated victor is a powerful reminder that justice often favors those who keep a cool head. But it makes you wonder, at what point should she have listened to her father's warnings? Or was this a lesson she had to learn the hard way? What did you learn from this betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss who was truly at fault for the collapse of this family. Please remember that this story was a fictional dramatization created specifically for societal reform and awareness. We share these dark, complex scenarios so that you can recognize the red flags in your own life and avoid repeating the toxic behaviors or legal mistakes shown here. Let this be a warning to those who think they can build a future on someone else's pain. Karma always finds a way to balance the scales. If you found value in Luna's story and want to stay informed on how to protect yourself and your loved ones, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join our community for daily lessons in justice.